Meredith Calloway, 34, stared at her mother's text message in disbelief. "You're keeping the kids tonight. We have plans. On New Year's Eve. With no warning." The same mother who had criticized her parenting skills for years was now dumping her own children on Meredith's doorstep. Little did she know this thoughtless act would set off a chain of discoveries that would shatter her family's foundation forever and reveal that her parents' perfect marriage was built on decades of lies. Before I dive into how my mother's New Year's Eve bombshell changed everything, I'd love to know where you're watching from. If you enjoy family drama with unexpected twists, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories where karma has the final say. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for how this family betrayal unfolds. Meredith rubbed her temples as she reread her mother's text. She had planned a quiet evening at home, a glass of wine takeout from her favorite Thai place and the new psychological thriller she'd been saving for a special occasion. After a grueling year of divorce proceedings with her ex-husband Derek, tonight was supposed to be her night of peace before facing a new year as a single mom. "Mom, I already told you I have plans tonight," Meredith typed back, though she knew it was futile. Vivian Calloway had always operated on the assumption that her needs superseded everyone else's. The response came almost instantly: "Cancel them. Your father and I haven't had a New Year's Eve to ourselves in years. The kids are packed and ready. We'll drop them off at 6. Meredith sighed, looking around her modest 2-bedroom apartment. Since the divorce, she'd been scraping by on her teacher's salary, while Derek somehow managed to avoid paying his court-ordered child support. Meanwhile, her parents lived in their sprawling colonial in the suburbs, enjoying their early retirement and frequent vacations. She considered calling her younger sister Abigail to vent but stopped herself. Abby was the golden child who could do no wrong in their mother's eyes. A successful corporate attorney with no children, Abby's life choices had always been praised, while Meredith's were scrutinized and found wanting. At precisely 6:03 p.m., the doorbell rang. Meredith opened it to find her mother standing there in a sleek black cocktail dress, her father Richard looking uncomfortable in a tuxedo beside her. 10-year-old Emma and 8-year-old Lucas peered up at her with matching expressions of confusion. "Here they are," Vivian said briskly, handing over 2 small overnight bags. "They've had dinner, but they'll probably want snacks later. No sugar after 8 and make sure they're in bed by 10. "Mom, it's New Year's Eve," Meredith protested. "They might want to stay up to watch the ball drop." Vivian's perfectly penciled eyebrows arched. "And let them start the year sleep-deprived." "I don't think so. Your permissiveness is exactly why they act out sometimes." Richard cleared his throat. "Viv, we should get going. We'll be late for the reservation." Meredith noticed her father wouldn't meet her eyes, which wasn't unusual. Richard Calloway had always been the quiet counterpart to her mother's domineering personality. What was unusual was the way he kept checking his watch. His face flushed with what looked like anxiety rather than anticipation. "Where are you two going anyway?" Meredith asked. "The Rosewood Hotel downtown," her mother replied, adjusting her diamond earrings. "They're having a special gala tonight, very exclusive." "Sounds fancy," Meredith said, forcing a smile for the kids' sake. "Have fun." As her parents turned to leave, Lucas suddenly piped up. "But Grandma, I thought you said we were going to." "That's enough, Lucas," Vivian cut him off with a sharp look. "Be good for your aunt. We'll pick you up tomorrow afternoon." After they left, Meredith knelt down to hug her niece and nephew. "Hey guys, looks like we're having an impromptu sleepover. What should we do first?" Emma shrugged, her expression serious beyond her years. "It doesn't matter. Grandma always does this." "Does what?" Meredith asked, surprised by the resignation in her niece's voice. "Makes plans and then changes them," Lucas explained, setting his backpack down. "She told us we were all going to a family party tonight, but then she said they were going to a grown-up place and we had to stay with you." Meredith felt a pang of sympathy. Her mother's capriciousness hadn't changed since she was a child. Well, their loss is my gain. Who wants to make homemade pizza and build a blanket fort in the living room? The evening proceeded better than expected. They made pizza with outlandish toppings. Lucas insisted on pineapple and olives, a combination that made Emma wrinkle her nose in disgust. Built an impressive fort spanning most of the living room and were now midway through a competitive round of Uno. Aunt Mary, Emma said carefully as she played a red 7. Are Grandma and Grandpa fighting a lot? The question caught Meredith off guard. Not that I know of. Why do you ask? Emma and Lucas exchanged a look. They yell when they think we're asleep, Lucas said. And Grandpa sleeps in the guest room now. And Grandma's always on her phone texting someone, Emma added. She gets mad if Grandpa asks who she's talking to. Meredith felt uneasy. Her parents had been married for 40 years and had always presented themselves as the perfect couple, critical of her failed marriage while holding themselves up as the gold standard. I'm sure it's nothing serious, she said, though she wasn't convinced. Adults sometimes go through rough patches too. As the night went on, Meredith couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When midnight approached, she relented on her mother's bedtime rule, and they counted down together, toasting with sparkling apple cider. The kids fell asleep shortly after in their blanket fort, leaving Meredith alone with her thoughts. On a whim, she decided to check the Rosewood Hotel's website on her phone, curious about this exclusive gala her parents were attending. The hotel was indeed hosting a New Year's Eve event, but it was a public affair, tickets available to anyone willing to pay the steep price. Nothing about it screamed exclusive or required formal attire. She was about to dismiss it when an Instagram notification caught her attention. An old college friend had tagged her in a post from a New Year's party at a local brewery. Meredith scrolled absently through the photos, then froze. In the background of one image, she could clearly see her father sitting at a table, not at the Rosewood, not in a tuxedo, and definitely not with her mother. Meredith's heart pounded as she zoomed in on the photo. There was no mistake, it was definitely her father, wearing a casual blue button-down shirt rather than the tuxedo he'd had on when dropping off the kids. He was sitting in a corner booth with a drink in hand, seemingly deep in conversation with someone just out of frame. She quickly texted her friend, "Hey Jackie, Happy New Year. Quick question, are you still at Logan's Brewery? I just noticed my dad might be there." 3 agonizing minutes later, Jackie replied, "Yeah, still here. Oh my God, Richard is your dad. He's been here all night with some blonde woman." Thought they were a couple. Meredith felt like the floor had dropped out beneath her. A blonde woman. Her mother was a brunette who prided herself on never having colored her hair. And her father had been at the brewery all night. What about the exclusive gala at the Rosewood? Her fingers trembled as she typed, "Could you discreetly take a photo of them? I'm watching his grandkids and thought he was somewhere else. Tonight." The photo that came through nearly made her drop her phone. Her father was sitting close to a woman who was definitely not Vivian Calloway. The blonde woman was younger, maybe in her 40s, and they were holding hands across the table. Even worse, Meredith recognized her, Diane Winters, her mother's best friend from the garden club. Questions raced through her mind. Was her father having an affair? Had her mother lied about their plans because she knew? Or was her mother lying too, and they were both leading secret lives? With shaking hands, Meredith opened Instagram again and checked her mother's friends' recent posts. Her mother barely used social media, but she followed her social circle religiously. Sure enough, after scrolling through several posts, she found a photo posted by Barbara Collins, another garden club member, from a charity poker tournament at the Westridge Country Club. The caption read, "Starting 2024 by losing money for a good cause at Vivi Calloway, cleaning us all out as usual." The timestamp was from just 20 minutes ago. And there in the photo was her mother, not in her cocktail dress, but wearing a casual sweater set, surrounded by playing cards, and smiling broadly. They had both lied. Her parents had dropped off the kids, changed clothes, and gone to separate events, neither of which was the exclusive gala they'd claimed to be attending together. Meredith felt sick. She looked over at Emma and Lucas sleeping peacefully in their fort, unaware that their grandparents' seemingly perfect marriage might be a complete sham. Was this why they'd been hearing arguments? Was this why her father was sleeping in the guest room? She considered calling Abby but hesitated. Her sister had always idolized their parents, especially their mother. Abby was currently on a ski trip in Colorado with her boyfriend, and Meredith didn't want to ruin her vacation with unproven suspicions. Instead, she pulled up her text conversation with her mother and typed, "Hope you and Dad are enjoying the Rosewood Gala. The kids mentioned you've been arguing lately. Everything okay?" She hit send before she could talk herself out of it. Several minutes passed with no response. That wasn't like her mother, who was typically glued to her phone. Finally, 3 dots appeared, disappeared, and then reappeared before a message came through. "Everything's fine. The kids have active imaginations." No mention of the gala, no explanation for the arguments, just a dismissal of the children's observations. Meredith decided to push further. "That's good to hear. Dad looked a little uncomfortable earlier. Tell him to loosen his bow tie and enjoy the champagne." This time her mother's response came quickly, "Will do. Going to dance now. Talk tomorrow." The casual deflection confirmed Meredith's suspicions. Her mother had no idea where her father was tonight, and she was maintaining the lie rather than admit it. Meredith sat in stunned silence, watching the sleeping children and trying to process what this meant. Her parents, who had criticized her endlessly when her own marriage fell apart, who had lectured her about commitment and family values, were living a lie. She remembered all the times her mother had made snide comments about Derek's infidelity, how she'd implied that Meredith should have tried harder to make her marriage work. "Marriage takes sacrifice," Vivian had said during the divorce. "Your generation gives up too easily." The hypocrisy was staggering. Morning came, and with it pancakes shaped like snowmen for the kids, and a facade of normalcy that Meredith struggled to maintain. She couldn't stop checking her phone, half expecting one of her parents to slip up and reveal their deception. Around noon, her mother texted that they would pick up the kids at 2 o'clock. Meredith replied with a cheerful "Great, we had fun," that belied the turmoil in her mind. When the doorbell rang at precisely 2 p.m., both her parents stood on the doorstep looking refreshed and united. Her father was back in his regular khakis and sweater, her mother in a casual but expensive outfit, both wearing matching smiles that now seemed painfully forced to Meredith's eyes. "Did you kids have a good time with your Aunt?" Richard asked, high-fiving Lucas. "The best," Lucas exclaimed. "We stayed up till midnight and built a huge fort." Vivian's smile tightened. "Midnight? I specifically said it was New Year's Eve," Mom Meredith interrupted. "One late night won't hurt them." "How was the gala?" she added innocently. "The Rosewood always does such beautiful events." Her parents exchanged a quick glance before her father answered. "It was lovely. Very elegant." "The champagne toast at midnight was spectacular." "I bet," Meredith said, watching her mother's face carefully. "Did you win much at the poker tournament afterward?" A flash of alarm crossed Vivian's features before she composed herself. "What poker tournament?" "Oh, I must have confused you with someone else." Meredith backpedaled. "I saw on Instagram that Barbara Collins was at some charity poker event last night." "Barbara does love her card games," her mother said dismissively. "We just had dinner and dancing at the Rosewood. Nothing too exciting." As the kids gathered their things, Meredith caught her father checking his phone, angling it away when he noticed her watching. Another text from Diane, perhaps. When they left, Meredith stood in her doorway for a long time, contemplating her next move. Her parents were clearly living separate lives while maintaining a facade of marital bliss. The question was, what was she going to do with this information? The discovery of her parents' deception gnawed at Meredith throughout the following week. She returned to her job as a fifth-grade teacher after the holiday break, going through the motions of lesson plans and student interactions while her mind constantly wandered back to New Year's Eve. During her lunch break, she called Jackie for more details about what she'd observed at the brewery. I didn't want to say too much over text, Jackie said, her voice lowered as if someone might overhear. But your dad and that woman were definitely intimate. They kissed at midnight. It wasn't a friendly peck either. Meredith's stomach clenched. How long were they there? They arrived around 7 and were still there when I left at 1 in the morning. They seemed really comfortable together, like this wasn't their first time out. Did they say anything about how they knew each other? Jackie hesitated. I overheard bits of their conversation when I walked by. They were talking about some trip they're planning to Santa Fe next month. And I heard her call him darling. A trip to Santa Fe. Her father, the history professor emeritus, had always wanted to visit the Southwest for its historical sites. Her mother had consistently refused, claiming the climate would wreak havoc on her sinuses. Was he finally going, but with Diane instead? After school, Meredith drove past her parents' house, slowing down as she approached. Both cars were in the driveway, her father's sensible sedan and her mother's luxury SUV. Everything looked normal from the outside. The house where she'd grown up, with its meticulous landscaping and warm yellow exterior, had always represented stability to her. Now she wondered what secrets it contained. She parked down the street and watched the house for nearly an hour, feeling like a detective in a bad movie. Eventually, her father emerged, got into his car and drove away. Without thinking, Meredith followed him. Richard drove to a coffee shop in a neighboring town, one Meredith had never been to. She parked across the street and watched as he entered, greeted someone inside with obvious familiarity, and sat down at a table with, to her surprise, not Diane but a man she didn't recognize. They talked animatedly for almost an hour. When they stood to leave, they shared a brief hug that seemed more than friendly. Meredith was confused. Was her father leading multiple secret lives? The next day she took a personal day off work and waited near her mother's regular hair salon. Sure enough, Vivian arrived for her standing appointment. But instead of going inside, she met a man in the parking lot, younger, perhaps early 30s, and they walked together to a restaurant down the street. Through the window, Meredith could see them in deep conversation. At one point, her mother placed her hand on the man's arm, leaning in close. They spent 2 hours together before parting ways with a brief embrace. Meredith felt like she was losing her grip on reality. Her parents, both of them, seemed to be involved with multiple people outside their marriage. How long had this been going on? Was their entire marriage a sham? That evening, she finally called Abby, who had returned from her ski trip. "Hey sis, what's up?" Abby answered, sounding relaxed and happy. "I need to talk to you about Mom and Dad," Meredith said, her voice tense. "Oh God, are they fighting again? I told Mom she needs to ease up on Dad. He's retired now, he should be able to pursue his interests without her criticizing everything." Meredith paused. "You know they've been fighting?" "Of course," Abby said, sounding surprised. "They've been at each other's throats for years. It got worse after Dad retired. Mom thinks he spends too much time at his meetings, and Dad says Mom's garden club is taking over their lives." "Have you ever wondered what these meetings and garden club sessions actually involve?" Meredith asked carefully. "What do you mean?" Meredith took a deep breath and shared everything she'd discovered: the separate New Year's Eve plans, Jackie's photo of their father with Diane, her own surveillance of both parents meeting other people. There was a long silence on the other end. "You're spying on them?" Abby finally asked, her tone disapproving. "That's what you took from all this? Not the fact that our parents are apparently both cheating on each other with multiple people?" "Look, Mary, maybe you're projecting because of what happened with Derek. Not every marriage is falling apart. Mom and Dad have been together for 40 years. They're the gold standard." Meredith felt a surge of frustration. The gold standard, who sleep in separate rooms, who lie about where they're going, who meet other people for intimate coffees and lunches. "You're jumping to conclusions," Abby insisted. "Dad's involved in that historical society and Mom has her charity work. They're allowed to have friends." Friends they kiss at midnight, friends they plan secret trips with. Wake up, Abby. Another uncomfortable silence followed. I think you should talk to them directly instead of playing detective, Abby said finally. This isn't healthy, Mary. After hanging up, Meredith paced her apartment fuming. Of course Abby would defend them. In her eyes, their parents could do no wrong. Meanwhile, Meredith had endured years of criticism about her own life choices being measured against an impossible standard that her parents themselves weren't meeting. She decided to dig deeper. If her parents were leading double lives, there had to be evidence beyond what she'd witnessed. She remembered her father's password pattern. He always used some combination of historical dates that were significant to him. She had once helped him set up his email account and had noticed the pattern. With a mixture of determination and guilt, she attempted to log into his email from her laptop. After several tries, Gettysburg Appomattox Fort Sumter, she hit on the right combination: Yorktown 1781. His inbox loaded and Meredith's heart raced as she scrolled through the messages. Most were mundane newsletters, Bill's correspondence with former colleagues. But there was a folder labeled Personal that contained exchanges with several people, including Diane Winters. The emails with Diane dated back over 5 years. They were clearly romantic, filled with terms of endearment and plans for clandestine meetings. But there were also emails with someone named Michael which were equally intimate but in a different way. They discussed books, politics, and personal struggles with an emotional honesty Meredith had never seen from her stoic father. Was her father bisexual? Had he been suppressing this part of himself throughout his marriage? She couldn't access her mother's email, but on a hunch she checked Facebook and found that Vivian was part of a private group called Silver Foxes of Westbrook County. Using her mother's standard password, the family dog's name followed by her birth year, Meredith managed to view the group's content. It was essentially a dating group for people over 50. Her mother was an active participant, commenting on men's photos and arranging meetups. She even had a profile that described her as technically married but practically single. Meredith sat back, overwhelmed by the evidence. Her parents weren't just having affairs, they were living entirely separate romantic lives while maintaining their marriage as a convenient fiction. The perfect couple who had judged her so harshly for her failed marriage were frauds. But one question remained unanswered. Did they know about each other's activities? Were they silently agreeing to this arrangement? Or were they both deceiving each other just as they'd been deceiving everyone else? Meredith spent the weekend in a state of emotional turmoil, alternating between anger, confusion, and a strange sense of validation. All those years of feeling inadequate because she couldn't maintain a perfect marriage like her parents, and it had been a mirage all along. By Sunday evening she'd made her decision. She would confront them both together. No more secrets, no more pretending. She texted her parents, "Need to talk to you both about something important. Can I come over for dinner tomorrow night? Just adults." Her mother responded almost immediately. "Of course, dear. Everything all right, we'll discuss tomorrow," Meredith replied, not trusting herself to say more. All through her workday on Monday she rehearsed what she would say, how she would present the evidence without sounding accusatory. But as she drove to her childhood home that evening, her carefully planned speech dissolved into a jumble of emotions. Her parents greeted her at the door, both smiling, though their eyes held questions. The house smelled of her mother's signature roast chicken, a dish she always prepared when she wanted to butter someone up. "So, what's this important matter you need to discuss?" Vivian asked as they settled at the dining table, crystal glasses filled with the expensive Cabernet her father favored. Meredith took a deep breath. "I need to ask you both something, and I want honest answers. Where were you on New Year's Eve?" Her parents exchanged a quick glance. "We told you," her father said, his voice deliberately casual. "We went to the gala at the Rosewood Hotel." "Together," Meredith pressed. "Of course together," her mother replied, a defensive edge creeping into her tone. "Where else would we be?" Meredith pulled out her phone and placed it on the table. That's interesting because I have a photo of Dad at Logan's Brewery with Diane Winters that night. She swiped to the next image. And another of you, Mom, at the Westridge Country Club playing poker. Neither of you was at the Rosewood. The silence that followed was deafening. Her father stared at his plate while her mother's face flushed crimson. You've been spying on us, Vivian finally asked, her voice tight. No, I accidentally discovered you were lying. There's a difference. Meredith turned to her father. Are you having an affair with Diane and with someone named Michael? Richard's head snapped up, his face pale. How did you, and you, Mom? Meredith continued, turning to Vivian. The Silver Foxes group, really technically married but practically single. Vivian's hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass. This is absolutely inappropriate, Meredith. Our private lives are none of your business. It became my business when you dumped your grandchildren on me with no notice, lied about where you were going, and then continued to lie when I gave you the opportunity to come clean, Meredith shot back. Not to mention the years you've spent criticizing my marriage and my divorce, holding yourselves up as this paragon of marital success when it was all a facade. Richard cleared his throat. Meredith, please try to understand. Marriage is complicated, don't she? Interrupted. Don't you dare feed me platitudes about marriage being complicated when you've been sleeping in separate bedrooms and seeing other people for who knows how long. How long has this been going on? Do you even love each other anymore? Her parents looked at each other, and for the first time Meredith saw something genuine pass between them, a shared recognition, perhaps even a shared grief. We haven't been in love for a very long time, her father said quietly, but we built a life together. We raised you girls together. Walking away seemed unnecessary. So instead you both just started separate lives without bothering to get divorced? Meredith asked incredulously. It's an arrangement, her mother said stiffly. We came to an understanding about 15 years ago. We maintain our home, our family holidays, our public image. What we do outside of that is our own business. 15 years. Meredith did the mental math. That would have been right around the time she started college. Had they been waiting for both daughters to leave home before they essentially ended their marriage while pretending it was still intact? Do you know about each other's partners? She asked, still struggling to wrap her head around this revelation. We know there are others, her father said carefully. We don't ask for details. So when Emma and Lucas said you've been fighting, her mother sighed. We still disagree about many things. The arrangement isn't always smooth, and neither of you thought that maybe you should tell your children the truth, Meredith demanded. Instead of letting us believe this lie, instead of judging my failed marriage by the standards of your fake one, we were protecting you, Vivian insisted. What good would it have done to tell you? Protecting me? Meredith laughed bitterly. You've been tearing me down for years. Why couldn't you make it work with Derek? Marriage takes sacrifice, Meredith. Your father and I have been together for 40 years because we put in the effort. She mimicked her mother's condescending tone. Do you have any idea how much damage your hypocrisy has caused? Richard had the decency to look ashamed. We never meant to hurt you, sweetheart. But you did, Meredith said, her voice breaking. You made me feel like I was a failure because I couldn't maintain the perfect marriage that you pretended to have. Do you know how many nights I cried myself to sleep wondering what was wrong with me that I couldn't make my marriage work like you had? While all along you were living this lie. Her mother's expression hardened. It wasn't all a lie. We built a good life, a stable home. We gave you and your sister everything you needed, except honesty, Meredith countered. Except the chance to see that relationships aren't black and white, that there's no such thing as perfect. Instead, you presented this facade and then criticized me when my real marriage didn't measure up to your fake one. The conversation continued into the night, with moments of heated accusations giving way to painful revelations. Her father admitted that he had been struggling with his sexual identity for decades but had felt trapped by societal expectations of his generation. Her mother confessed that she had stayed in the marriage partly out of pride and partly because divorce still carried a stigma in her social circle. "Does Abby know?" Meredith asked finally. "No," her father said. "We never told either of you." "You should," Meredith said. "She deserves the truth as much as I did." As the night wore on and emotions began to settle, a strange sense of clarity washed over Meredith. The parents she had idolized and feared disappointing her entire life were just people, flawed, complex people who had made choices she might not agree with but could begin to understand. "I'm not saying what you did was right," she told them as she prepared to leave. "The lies, the judgment, the hypocrisy, it hurt me deeply, but I'm glad I know the truth now. It helps me put my own life in perspective." Standing at the door, her mother reached out and touched her arm. "Will you tell Abby? Or should we?" Meredith thought for a moment. "You should tell her, but first I have something important to ask." "Hey everyone, I can feel we're reaching a real turning point in this story. If you're as invested as I am in how Meredith handles this bombshell about her parents' secret lives, make sure you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. I'd love to know what you would do in Meredith's situation. Would you tell your sister or let your parents come clean? Drop your thoughts in the comments below while we continue with this family drama. First, Meredith set her hand on the doorknob. "I need to know why you chose that specific night, New Year's Eve, to drop the kids off with me. Why the urgency? Why the lies?" Her parents exchanged another one of their loaded glances. A silent communication system developed over decades of marriage, however unconventional it had become. "Your father had already made plans with his friend," Vivian said carefully. "I found out last minute that Diane's husband would be out of town, so they wanted to spend the evening together. I had already RSVP'd to Barbara's poker tournament. The children weren't part of either plan. So you just decided I had nothing better to do, that my time wasn't valuable." Meredith felt the anger rising again. "Abby was out of town," her mother replied, as if that explained everything. "And you're so good with the kids." "That's not the point, Mom," Meredith said, exasperated. "The point is that you assumed I would be available because in your mind my life is less important than yours. You've always treated me that way, like my time, my feelings, my experiences matter less." "That's not true," Richard protested weakly. "Isn't it? When Derek and I were separating, you told me to stick it out because that's what adults do. You made me feel like I was taking the easy way out, like I wasn't trying hard enough. Meanwhile, you two had essentially separated decades ago but were too cowardly to make it official." Vivian flinched at the accusation. "We thought we were doing what was best for everyone." "No," Meredith said firmly. "You were doing what was easiest for yourselves. And that's fine, it's your life. But don't pretend it was some noble sacrifice when really it was just convenient. And don't ever presume to judge my choices again." She left them standing in the doorway, her father looking deflated, and her mother for once at a loss for words. The drive home was strangely peaceful, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, not completely gone but lighter. The next morning, Abby called, her voice tense. "Mom just called me in tears." "What did you do, Mary?" Meredith sighed, pouring herself another cup of coffee. She had expected this. "I didn't do anything, Abby. I just confronted them with the truth. By spying on them and hacking into their accounts, that's invasion of privacy. Would you rather continue believing the lie that our parents have this perfect marriage we should all aspire to?" There was a pause. "They told me everything," Abby finally said, her voice smaller. "About their arrangement. About Dad's relationships. About Mom's dating group. And I don't know what to think," Abby admitted. "I feel like everything I believed about our family was wrong." "Not everything," Meredith said, surprising herself with the gentleness in her voice. "They still raised us. They still provided for us. They still love us. They just aren't who we thought they were as a couple." "How are you so calm about this?" Abby asked. "You're usually the emotional one." Meredith laughed softly. Trust me, I've cycled through every emotion possible. But in the end I realized something important. Their marriage isn't my marriage. Their choices aren't my choices. And most importantly, their failures don't define me. I suppose Abby said, though she sounded unconvinced. But what do we do now? Just accept that our parents have been living a lie for most of our adult lives. I think we try to build an honest relationship with them going forward. No more facades, no more impossible standards. Just real people trying to connect. Over the following weeks, the Calloway family dynamic shifted in subtle but significant ways. Richard called Meredith regularly, their conversations more open and genuine than they had been in years. He spoke about his historical research, his book club, and occasionally tentatively about Michael, who turned out to be a widower he'd met at a Civil War reenactment 5 years ago. Vivian was more resistant to change, still clinging to appearances even as the foundation crumbled beneath her. She continued to make judgmental comments about Meredith's life choices, until one day Meredith finally stood her ground. "Mom, I love you, but I'm not accepting your criticism anymore," she said firmly during a particularly tense lunch. "Not unless you're willing to apply the same standards to yourself." Vivian had opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again, a look of reluctant respect crossing her features. "You've changed," she observed. "I've grown," Meredith corrected. "There's a difference." As winter melted into spring, Meredith found herself unexpectedly thriving. The truth about her parents' marriage had set her free in ways she hadn't anticipated. No longer measuring herself against an impossible standard, she found confidence in her own decisions. One evening in April, she received a text from an unfamiliar number. "Hi Meredith, this is Diane Winters. I was wondering if we could meet for coffee sometime this week." Meredith stared at her phone in disbelief. Her father's mistress wanted to meet. Her first instinct was to refuse, but curiosity won out. "Thursday 4 p.m. at Meadowlark Cafe," she suggested. Diane was already seated when Meredith arrived, looking nervous but determined. She was attractive in a subtle way, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she offered a tentative smile. "Thank you for coming," Diane said. "I know this must be awkward." "That's putting it mildly," Meredith replied, ordering a cappuccino from the waiting server. Diane took a deep breath. "I wanted to apologize. Not for loving your father, I won't apologize for that, but for the deception. You deserved better." Meredith was taken aback by her directness. "Why now? You've been seeing my dad for years, according to the emails I found. Richard told me about your confrontation, about how it affected him. He's been different since then." "We talked about leaving them," Diane admitted, "many times. But there was always a reason not to: the social fallout, financial entanglements, not wanting to hurt Vivian or Tom. So instead you conducted an affair that hurt them anyway, just more slowly and secretly," Meredith observed. Diane winced. "When you put it like that, yes. We told ourselves we were being kind by keeping it hidden, but maybe we were just being cowards." As they parted ways, Diane hesitated. "Your father loves you very much, you know. He's always been so proud of you, your resilience, your authenticity. He said you're braver than he ever was." Those words stayed with Meredith, echoing in her mind during a conversation with her father the following week. "I'm considering asking your mother for a divorce," Richard said quietly as they walked through the botanical gardens. "An official one, I mean." Meredith glanced at him, surprised. "Why now, after all these years?" "Because of you," he said simply. "You showed me what courage looks like. Facing the truth even when it's painful." "Dad." "No, let me finish. When your marriage to Derek ended, you didn't hide it or pretend everything was fine. You acknowledged it was over, you grieved, and then you rebuilt your life honestly. I admired that more than you knew, even while your mother and I were criticizing you." 2 weeks later, Richard moved out of the family home and into a small apartment downtown. Vivian, to everyone's surprise, seemed almost relieved. 40 years is a long time to keep up appearances, she admitted to Meredith over tea. I'm exhausted. Emma and Lucas took the news of their grandparents' separation with remarkable equanimity. We already knew they didn't really like each other, Emma said with the blunt wisdom of a 10-year-old. As summer approached, Meredith found herself inviting her parents separately to a barbecue at her apartment. Abby would be there with her boyfriend, and Meredith had recently started dating Sam, a science teacher from her school, with a gentle humor that balanced her intensity. The gathering was awkward at first, with Richard and Vivian carefully maintaining their distance from each other. But as the evening progressed, something unexpected happened. They began to relax. Freed from the pretense of marital harmony, they could simply be two people who shared a history and two daughters they both loved. Meredith watched them from across the patio, her father laughing at something. Sam said her mother showing Abby's boyfriend how to properly grill corn, Emma and Lucas playing with Sam's dog in the grass. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that she realized was far more valuable than the polished illusion she'd grown up with. Later that night, after everyone had left, Sam helped her clean up the kitchen. "Your family is interesting," he observed, loading the dishwasher. "Not what I expected based on your stories." "They've changed," Meredith said. "Or maybe I've changed how I see them. Either way, it seems like a good change." Meredith nodded, thinking about the long winding path that had led her here, from the painful end of her marriage, to the shocking revelations about her parents, to this moment of unexpected contentment. "The funny thing is," she said, "I spent so many years feeling like a failure because my marriage didn't last. I thought there was something wrong with me because I couldn't maintain the perfect relationship my parents supposedly had. But now I realize that honesty, even painful honesty, is worth more than a beautiful lie." Sam squeezed her hand. "To honesty, then." "To honesty," she agreed, "and to new beginnings." By the time autumn arrived, bringing with it crisp air and falling leaves, the Calloway family had settled into a new normal. Richard and Diane were openly dating now, causing a minor scandal in their social circle that quickly gave way to acceptance. Vivian had thrown herself into her garden club and charity work, seeming more energized and less critical than Meredith could ever remember her being. What no one expected was for Tom Winters, Diane's estranged husband, to show up at Meredith's classroom one afternoon in October. "Mr. Winters," she said, surprised to find him waiting outside her door after the students had left. She knew him only vaguely from garden club functions her mother had dragged her to over the years. "Miss Calloway," he said, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit. "I apologize for the intrusion. I was hoping we might talk." They sat at a local cafe, an unlikely pair brought together by their respective spouses' affair. Tom was older than Richard, with silver hair and a dignified bearing that couldn't quite mask his evident discomfort. "I'll be direct," he said after they'd ordered. "Your father has asked Diane for a divorce." Meredith nodded cautiously. "I'm aware. My mother mentioned they'd filed the paperwork. Diane has asked for the same from me." His hands trembled slightly as he lifted his coffee cup. "After 32 years of marriage." "I'm sorry," Meredith said, and found that she genuinely meant it. Whatever his flaws might be, she recognized the pain of betrayal in his eyes. "I didn't come here for sympathy," Tom said, though his expression softened. "I came because I thought you might understand my position in a way others don't. The displacement one feels when a marriage that defined your life suddenly ends." Meredith considered this. "My situation was different. My marriage lasted 7 years, not 32. And I was the one who initiated the divorce after Derek's affairs became too much to ignore." "Affairs?" Tom looked surprised. "Plural 3 that I knew of," Meredith confirmed. "The last one with my friend from college. That was the final straw." Tom was quiet for a moment. "I knew about Richard," he finally said. "I've known for years." Meredith stared at him. You knew my father was having an affair with your wife and you didn't say anything. He shrugged, a gesture that seemed to contain decades of resignation. Diane and I hadn't been truly married in the emotional sense for a very long time. I had my own arrangements. We had an unspoken agreement, but I never expected her to want to make it official. So you're not upset about the affair itself, just about the divorce? I'm upset about the public nature of it all, Tom clarified. The gossip, the pitying looks, having to explain to our children and grandchildren why Grandma and Grandpa are selling the house they visited their entire lives. Meredith understood then. It wasn't so different from what her parents had been doing all these years, preserving appearances while living separate emotional lives. The only difference was that her parents had maintained the physical facade of a shared home. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Tom hesitated. Because I thought perhaps we could help each other. You see, I've been seeing someone as well. Someone close to you. Meredith felt a chill run through her. If you're about to tell me you're having an affair with my mother. To her surprise, Tom laughed. Good God, no! Vivian Calloway terrifies me. Always has. He sobered. No, I've been seeing Abigail. The cappuccino Meredith had been lifting to her lips crashed back onto the saucer. My sister Abby. You're seeing my sister. Tom at least had the grace to look ashamed. It started at a fundraising gala last year. She was representing her law firm. I was there for the bank. We got talking. She's half your age, Meredith said, feeling nauseous. She's 32, Tom corrected. I'm 59. It's not ideal, but it's not unprecedented. Does she know you're here talking to me about this? No, he admitted, and that's part of why I wanted to meet. Abigail thinks no one knows about us. She's been terrified of how you'll react, especially given how close you two have become recently. Meredith's head was spinning. Her sister and Tom Winters, Abby, who had been so judgmental about Meredith's divorce, who had initially defended their parents' perfect marriage, was secretly dating her father's mistress's husband. The interconnected web of deception in their family was reaching absurdist levels. Let me get this straight, she said, trying to organize her thoughts. My father is divorcing my mother to be with your wife, who is divorcing you, and meanwhile you've been seeing my sister, who has been lying to me about it, and you want us to. What exactly? I want us to present a united front, Tom said. When all of this becomes public, and it will in a town this size, it's going to get messy. I thought if you and I could demonstrate that we're at peace with the situation, it might help smooth things over. Meredith stared at him incredulously. You want me to pretend I'm fine with all of this, with the fact that my entire family has been lying to each other for years? Not pretend, Tom said quickly. Just accept it, move forward. For all our sakes. She stood up, gathering her bag. Mr. Winters, I appreciate your candor, but I think you've misunderstood me fundamentally. I'm not interested in maintaining appearances or smoothing things over. I'm interested in the truth, however uncomfortable it might be. That evening Meredith called Abby, who picked up on the first ring. Hey sis, what's up? Abby said, her voice artificially bright. I had an interesting conversation with Tom Winters today, Meredith said without preamble. The silence on the other end was deafening. Mary, I can explain. Save it, Meredith interrupted. I don't care who you date, Abby. I care that you've been lying to me while simultaneously judging me for my failed marriage and accusing me of overreacting to Mom and Dad's situation. It's complicated, Abby said weakly. Everything in this family is complicated, Meredith sighed. But it doesn't have to be. We could try honesty for a change. After a long pause, Abby said, You're right. I'm sorry. Can we meet tomorrow? I'll tell you everything. Over breakfast the next morning, Abby revealed that she and Tom had been seeing each other for nearly 18 months. It had started as a mentorship. He had connections in corporate law that could benefit her career, but had evolved into something more. I was going to tell you, Abby insisted, especially after everything came out about Mom and Dad. But then it all got so tangled. Tom didn't want to upset Diane while she was dealing with the fallout from Dad moving out. So instead you let me think I was crazy for suspecting our parents were leading double lives when you knew perfectly well what was going on. Abby looked genuinely remorseful. I was scared, Mary. Scared of losing Tom, scared of what people would think, scared of disappointing you. Meredith was genuinely surprised. Since when do you care about disappointing me? Mom and Dad, sure, but me, I've always cared what you think. Abby said quietly. You're so authentic. You always know who you are and what you want. I've spent my whole life trying to be perfect to meet expectations. It's exhausting. For the first time, Meredith saw her sister clearly not as the golden child who could do no wrong, but as someone who had been just as constrained by their parents' expectations as she had been, just in different ways. So what now? Meredith asked. Tom seems to think you two are headed for marriage once his divorce is finalized. Abby looked startled. He said that. We've never discussed marriage. That seems to be a pattern in this family, not discussing important things. The sisters shared a rueful laugh and something shifted between them. The competition and resentment that had characterized their relationship for so long gave way to a tentative solidarity. As the holidays approached, the Calloway Winters entanglement became the primary gossip in their small community. Richard and Diane purchased a modest house together near the community college where he occasionally taught history courses. Vivian, to everyone's surprise, announced she was selling the family home and moving to Arizona. I've always wanted to live somewhere warm, she told Meredith over the phone. Richard hated the idea of the desert, but I find it appealing, clean, minimal, a fresh start. Tom and Abby continued dating, though, with a new transparency that included occasional uncomfortable dinner parties with all parties involved. Emma and Lucas adapted to the new family configuration with the resilience of children mainly concerned with whether they would still get birthday presents from all relevant adults. They would. And Meredith found that as her family's facades crumbled around her, her own life solidified. Her relationship with Sam deepened. Her confidence in her teaching career grew. The weight of trying to live up to impossible standards lifted, leaving her lighter, freer. At Thanksgiving, they gathered at Meredith's apartment, an unlikely assortment of current and former spouses, partners, siblings, and children. There were awkward moments and tense silences, but there was also genuine laughter and connection. As they sat around the table, Richard raised his glass. To family, he said, in all its messy, complicated, beautiful forms. To truth, Meredith added, however difficult it might be. And to second chances, Vivian said, surprising everyone. It's never too late to start again. Meredith looked around at the faces of these people who had hurt each other, lied to each other, and yet somehow found their way back to a kind of honesty. It wasn't the family she had grown up believing in, but perhaps it was the family they had always been, beneath the surface, flawed, human, real, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. 1 year after the New Year's Eve that had set everything in motion, Meredith stood in her kitchen preparing for another holiday gathering. So much had changed in 12 months. Her father and Diane were now married after a simple courthouse ceremony. Her mother had settled in Sedona, Arizona, where she'd started a small garden design business and begun dating a local artist. Tom and Abby had broken up amicably, realizing their relationship had been more about rebellion than compatibility. As for Meredith, she and Sam had moved in together 3 months ago, blending their lives with a care and honesty that she now understood was the true foundation of any lasting relationship. The doorbell rang and Emma and Lucas burst in, followed by their parents, Abby's older brother Jason and his wife Courtney, who were visiting for the holidays. Aunt Mary, Lucas exclaimed, now 9 and still full of energy. Grandpa and Miss Diane are right behind us with the pie. And Grandma's on video chat from Arizona, Emma added, holding up a tablet where Vivian waved from a sun-drenched patio. As the apartment filled with family, Meredith felt a profound sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been more tears, more arguments, more revelations along the way. but there had also been healing, forgiveness, and a new kind of honesty that allowed them to see each other clearly for perhaps the first time. When the last guest had departed and she and Sam were cleaning up, he asked, "What are you thinking about? You've got that faraway look." Meredith smiled. "I was just thinking about how sometimes the most painful truths lead to the most authentic happiness." "Philosopher Meredith has entered the chat," Sam teased gently. She laughed, leaning into his embrace. "I'm serious though. A year ago I thought my family was falling apart. Now I realize we're just finding our way to something more real." "To real happiness," Sam said, kissing her temple. "To real happiness," Meredith agreed. "Messy, complicated, and absolutely worth it. This past year has taught me that family vengeance isn't about getting even. It's about breaking cycles of dishonesty and finding the courage to live authentically." I'd love to hear if any of you have experienced similar family revelations or moments where painful truths ultimately led to healing. Drop your stories in the comments below. And if this journey of family drama and redemption resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late for a fresh start. Thank you all for listening to my family's story. And remember, sometimes the most painful truths pave the way for the most genuine happiness. Until next time.